The morning sun cast long shadows across the tarmac at Naval Air Station Oceana as Lieutenant Sarah Phoenix Martinez walked toward the briefing room. Her flight suit was crisp, her helmet tucked under her arm, but the weight on her shoulders felt heavier than any equipment she carried. 3 months had passed since Admiral Harrison's public dismissal of her capabilities, and the echo of his words still rang through the corridors of the installation. Sarah had earned her wings through the same rigorous training as every other naval aviator, but being one of only 12 women in her squadron made every mistake magnified and every success scrutinized. Her call sign, Phoenix, had been earned during a particularly challenging training exercise where she had successfully recovered from what instructors called an impossible situation, bringing her damaged aircraft home safely when others might have ejected. The briefing room buzzed with the usual pre-flight chatter as pilots discussed weather conditions, mission parameters, and aircraft status. Sarah took her usual seat near the back, nodding to her squadron mates who acknowledged her with the professional courtesy that military discipline demanded. Lieutenant Commander Jake Viper Thompson, her closest friend in the squadron, gave her an encouraging smile that she returned with a slight nod. Commander Richards entered the room, his presence immediately commanding attention. The squadron fell silent as he approached the podium, his weathered face bearing the marks of countless hours in cockpits and command positions. He had flown missions over the Persian Gulf, the Balkans, and had seen more combat than most of the pilots in the room combined. Ladies and gentlemen, today's exercise will test your ability to adapt to changing combat scenarios, Richards began, his voice carrying the authority that came with experience. Intel suggests our adversaries are developing new electronic warfare capabilities. Your mission is to penetrate simulated enemy airspace, neutralize designated targets, and return to base while dealing with simulated surface-to-air missile threats and electronic jamming. Sarah listened intently, her mind already processing the tactical challenges they would face. Electronic warfare was an evolving battlefield where traditional flying skills met cutting-edge technology. The ability to think quickly, adapt to changing situations, and maintain situational awareness while being electronically blinded separated good pilots from exceptional ones. The mission briefing continued with detailed weather reports, aircraft assignments, and rules of engagement for the training exercise. Sarah was assigned to fly as wingman to Lieutenant Johnson in a two-ship formation, their call signs Phoenix and Hammer, respectively. Their target was a simulated enemy command center, located deep in the training range, protected by multiple layers of simulated air defenses. As the briefing concluded, pilots began filing out to conduct pre-flight inspections of their aircraft. Sarah gathered her materials and headed toward the flight line, where her FA-18 Super Hornet waited. The aircraft stood like a technological marvel against the blue Virginia sky, its twin engines promising the power to carry her into whatever challenges lay ahead. Pre-flight inspection was a ritual that every pilot performed with religious devotion. Sarah walked around her aircraft, checking control surfaces, examining the landing gear, and ensuring that every external component was secure and properly configured. Her crew chief, Petty Officer Rodriguez, had already completed his inspection, but pilots never relied solely on others when their lives depended on the aircraft's performance. "She's ready to fly, Lieutenant," Rodriguez reported, his pride in his work evident in his voice. All systems checked out perfectly during the morning inspection. Fuel load is complete, and all ordnance is properly configured for today's exercise. Sarah smiled and thanked him, knowing that crew chiefs like Rodriguez were the unsung heroes who kept naval aviation functioning. Their expertise and dedication meant that pilots could focus on flying and mission execution rather than worrying about mechanical reliability. Climbing into the cockpit, Sarah began the familiar startup sequence that transformed the silent aircraft into a living, breathing machine. Systems came online one by one, displays illuminated with critical flight information, and the twin engines spooled up with their characteristic whine. Radio checks confirmed communication with both her wingman and air traffic control. "Phoenix, this is Hammer," came Johnson's voice over the radio. "Ready for taxi when you are." "Roger, Hammer. Phoenix is ready," Sarah responded, beginning the taxi toward the active runway. The tower cleared them for takeoff, and Sarah advanced the throttles, feeling the familiar surge of acceleration as her aircraft rolled down the runway. At rotation speed, she pulled back on the stick, and the Super Hornet lifted off gracefully, climbing into the clear morning sky. As they formed up and headed toward the training range, Sarah reviewed the mission parameters one more time. The electronic warfare environment they would encounter was designed to simulate the most challenging conditions that modern naval aviators might face. Radar systems would be jammed, communications would be disrupted, and they would need to rely on their training, instincts, and ability to adapt to changing situations. The first phase of the mission proceeded according to plan. Flying at low altitude to avoid simulated radar detection, Sarah and Johnson navigated toward their target using terrain masking and careful route planning. Their aircraft systems functioned normally, and communication with each other remained clear and professional. However, as they approached the initial point for their attack run, the electronic warfare simulation began in earnest. Warning tones filled Sarah's cockpit as her radar warning receiver detected multiple simulated surface-to-air missile systems acquiring her aircraft. Electronic jamming made her own radar nearly useless, reducing her situational awareness to what she could see through her canopy and the limited information provided by her aircraft's defensive systems. "Hammer, Phoenix. I'm showing multiple SAM sites active. Are you picking up the same threats?" Sarah transmitted, her voice remaining calm despite the challenging tactical situation. "Negative, Phoenix. My systems are showing different threat locations. Electronic warfare is really messing with our sensors," Johnson replied, the strain evident in his voice as he tried to make sense of conflicting information from his aircraft's systems. This was exactly the type of scenario that separated experienced pilots from novices. When technology failed or provided unreliable information, pilots needed to fall back on fundamental flying skills, tactical knowledge, and the ability to think clearly under pressure. Sarah had trained extensively for such situations, but this was her first time experiencing such intensive electronic warfare simulation. Making a quick decision based on her assessment of the tactical situation, Sarah suggested a modification to their planned attack route. "Hammer, recommend we adjust our approach to avoid the heaviest concentration of simulated threats. I'm seeing a gap in coverage to the northwest that might give us a better angle on the target." Johnson considered her suggestion for a moment before responding. "Good call, Phoenix. Lead us through that corridor." The fact that he was allowing her to lead the modified attack run was significant. As the more senior pilot, Johnson could have insisted on maintaining the original plan, or leading any changes himself. His trust in her tactical judgment showed the respect she had earned through consistent performance, despite Admiral Harrison's previous dismissal of her capabilities. Sarah banked her aircraft toward the northwest, using a combination of terrain masking and electronic countermeasures to minimize their exposure to simulated threats. Her flying was precise and confident, each maneuver calculated to maximize their chances of mission success while minimizing risk to both aircraft. The modified approach required split-second timing and coordination between the two aircraft. Sarah led them through a narrow valley that provided natural protection from most of the simulated radar systems, then pulled up sharply to position for the attack run on their target. The maneuver was executed flawlessly, with Johnson following her lead with professional precision. The target acquisition phase required split-second precision as Sarah's aircraft emerged from the valley and lined up for the simulated attack run. Her heads-up display showed the designated target coordinates, but the electronic jamming made weapon systems guidance unreliable. This was where pilot skill truly mattered, where training and instinct had to compensate for technological limitations. "Phoenix, I have visual on the target complex," she transmitted to Johnson, who was maintaining position as her wingman. The simulated enemy command center appeared as a cluster of buildings surrounded by defensive positions, all carefully designed to replicate real-world combat scenarios. "Roger, Phoenix. I'm with you. Execute when ready," Johnson responded, his confidence in her leadership evident in his tone. Sarah initiated the attack sequence, her aircraft diving toward the target while simultaneously deploying electronic countermeasures to defeat the simulated surface-to-air missiles that the exercise controllers were launching at them. The complexity of managing multiple systems while flying a high-performance aircraft in a combat environment demanded the kind of multitasking ability that only the best pilots possessed. The simulated weapons release was executed flawlessly, with both aircraft delivering their ordnance on target before beginning their egress from the target area. But the exercise was far from over, as the return journey would test their ability to navigate through continued electronic jamming while avoiding additional threats that exercise controllers had positioned along their exit route. As they began their withdrawal from the target area, Sarah noticed something that made her reconsider their planned egress route. The electronic warfare environment had shifted, creating new threat patterns that hadn't existed during their inbound flight. Simulated enemy fighters had apparently been scrambled to intercept them, and the safest exit route was no longer available. Hammer, Phoenix. I'm seeing new air threats to the south. Recommend we modify our egress to avoid potential intercept, she transmitted, her tactical awareness proving once again that her reputation as Phoenix was well-earned. Copy, Phoenix. What do you recommend? Johnson asked, deferring to her judgment in the rapidly changing tactical situation. Sarah quickly analyzed the available options, considering fuel consumption, threat locations, aircraft performance limitations, and time constraints. The ability to process multiple variables simultaneously while flying a high-performance aircraft was exactly the kind of skill that Admiral Harrison had questioned when he dismissed her capabilities months earlier. I recommend a low-altitude egress through the eastern corridor. It'll use more fuel, but it keeps us below the radar coverage of those simulated interceptors, she suggested, her voice calm and professional despite the demanding circumstances. The modified egress route required flying at extremely low altitude through challenging terrain, pushing both aircraft and pilots to their operational limits. Sarah led the formation through mountain valleys and around terrain features that provided natural concealment from simulated enemy sensors. Her flying was aggressive but controlled, demonstrating the kind of tactical flying that combat missions demanded. 20 minutes later, both aircraft crossed the exercise boundary and were officially safe from simulated threats. They had successfully completed their mission, neutralized their assigned targets, and returned to friendly airspace without being shot down by the exercise controllers. More importantly, they had done so while adapting to changing circumstances and demonstrating the kind of tactical flexibility that real combat operations required. Exercise complete. Phoenix and Hammer, return to base for debrief, came the voice of the exercise controller over the radio. The flight back to Naval Air Station Oceana gave Sarah time to reflect on the mission they had just completed. She had led a successful tactical modification under challenging conditions, earned the trust and confidence of her wingman, and demonstrated exactly the kind of capabilities that her call sign represented. Yet she knew that the real test would come during the post-mission debrief, where every decision would be analyzed and evaluated. Landing back at Oceana, Sarah completed the post-flight inspection of her aircraft and gathered her materials for the mandatory debrief session. These sessions were critical learning opportunities where pilots could analyze their performance, identify areas for improvement, and share lessons learned with other squadron members. The debrief room filled with pilots from multiple aircraft who had participated in the morning's exercise. Commander Richards presided over the session, using large displays to show aircraft tracks, timing data, and other mission parameters that had been recorded during the exercise. Overall, this morning's mission was successful, Richards began. All aircraft successfully engaged their assigned targets and returned safely. However, I want to focus on some tactical decisions that were made during the exercise, particularly the route modifications executed by Phoenix and Hammer. Sarah felt her heartbeat quicken as attention focused on her decisions during the mission. Military debriefs were designed to be learning experiences, but they could also be uncomfortable when individual decisions were scrutinized by senior officers and peer pilots. Phoenix, explain your decision to modify the initial attack route, Richards requested, his tone neutral but expectant. Standing, Sarah moved to the front of the room where she could reference the mission displays. Sir, when we encountered the electronic warfare environment, I assessed that our original route would expose us to an unacceptable level of simulated threats. The northwestern corridor provided better concealment and a more advantageous angle of attack on the target. And what factors did you consider when making that assessment? Richards continued, his questions designed to understand her tactical thought process. Sarah outlined the various elements she had evaluated: threat locations, terrain masking opportunities, fuel consumption implications, timing requirements, and coordination with her wingman. Her analysis demonstrated thorough understanding of the tactical situation and sound decision-making under pressure. Other pilots in the room listened intently as Sarah explained her reasoning. Some nodded in agreement with her assessment, while others asked detailed questions about specific aspects of her tactical decisions. The discussion was professional and educational, focusing on the learning opportunities that the exercise had provided. "What about the egress modification?" Richards asked, moving to the second major tactical decision Sarah had made during the mission. "Sir, when new air threats appeared during our withdrawal, I recommended the eastern corridor to avoid potential intercept. The low-altitude route required more fuel and was more challenging to fly, but it provided better survivability against the simulated fighter threats," Sarah explained. Lieutenant Commander Thompson, who had observed the exercise from the ground control facility, stood to add his perspective. From the controller's viewpoint, Phoenix's tactical modifications significantly improved their probability of mission success. The original routes would have resulted in probable intercept by the simulated threats. The debrief continued for another 30 minutes, covering various aspects of the exercise and lessons learned by all participants. When it concluded, pilots began filing out of the room to return to their normal squadron duties. Sarah gathered her materials, feeling satisfied with how the mission and debrief had proceeded. As she reached the door, Commander Richards called her name. "Phoenix, a word please." Sarah returned to the front of the room where Richards waited, his expression serious but not disapproving. She wondered if there was some aspect of her performance that needed additional discussion or correction. "Lieutenant, I've been watching your performance over the past several months," he began, his voice measured and thoughtful. "What happened during today's exercise was not an isolated incident. You consistently demonstrate sound tactical judgment and excellent flying skills." Sarah listened carefully, uncertain where the conversation was heading, but grateful for the positive assessment of her capabilities. "I want you to know that there are people in senior positions who have taken notice of your abilities," Richards continued. "Your call sign isn't just squadron recognition anymore. People throughout the installation know about Phoenix and the quality of work you produce." The conversation continued for several more minutes as Richards provided specific feedback about her performance and discussed potential opportunities for advanced training or increased responsibilities. When it concluded, Sarah left the debrief room with a renewed sense of confidence and purpose. Walking across the tarmac toward the squadron spaces, Sarah reflected on how much had changed since Admiral Harrison's dismissal months earlier. Through consistent performance, professional dedication, and the ability to rise to challenging situations, she had gradually built a reputation that transcended initial skepticism about her capabilities. 2 weeks after the successful electronic warfare exercise, Sarah received an unexpected summons to report to the installation commander's office. The message provided no details about the purpose of the meeting, leaving her to wonder what might require the attention of such senior leadership. She ensured her uniform was perfectly pressed and her appearance met the highest military standards before making her way to the administrative complex. The installation commander's office occupied prime real estate in the main headquarters building, with windows overlooking the flight line where aircraft operations continued throughout the day. Secretary Petty Officer Williams greeted Sarah professionally and indicated she should take a seat while waiting for Captain Morrison, the installation commander, to become available. After a brief wait, Captain Morrison emerged from his inner office, followed by someone Sarah immediately recognized: Admiral Harrison. The same admiral who had publicly dismissed her capabilities months earlier now stood before her, his expression unreadable as he acknowledged her presence with a slight nod. "Lieutenant Martinez, thank you for responding promptly," Captain Morrison began, his tone formal but not unfriendly. "Please, join us in my office." The office was spacious and professionally decorated with military memorabilia, photographs from various deployments, and awards that reflected Morrison's distinguished career. Sarah took the seat, indicated while Morrison and Admiral Harrison positioned themselves across from her. "Lieutenant, Admiral Harrison has requested this meeting to discuss your recent performance and some opportunities that may be available," Morrison explained, his words carefully chosen to maintain military protocol while acknowledging the unusual nature of the situation. Admiral Harrison leaned forward, his weathered hands clasped in front of him. Lieutenant Martinez, I owe you an explanation and, frankly, an apology. Several months ago, I made some public statements about your capabilities that were based on incomplete information, and I now realize some outdated assumptions about naval aviation. Sarah listened carefully, maintaining the respectful silence that military courtesy demanded when senior officers were speaking. Inside, however, she felt a mixture of vindication and curiosity about what had prompted this dramatic reversal of opinion. Since that time, I have received multiple reports about your performance from squadron commanders, exercise controllers, and other pilots, the Admiral continued. The consensus is clear. You are an exceptional naval aviator whose tactical skills and flying abilities represent the highest standards of our service. The Admiral paused, seeming to choose his words carefully before continuing. Your call sign Phoenix has become well known throughout this installation and beyond. When senior officers discuss promising young pilots, your name consistently appears in those conversations. Captain Morrison added his perspective to the discussion. Lieutenant, what Admiral Harrison is trying to say is that your reputation has grown considerably. The modifications you made during the recent electronic warfare exercise have been studied by our tactical development team as examples of excellent decision-making under pressure. Sarah felt a surge of professional pride, knowing that her tactical decisions were being used as teaching examples for other pilots. This was the kind of recognition that truly mattered in military aviation, where reputation was built through consistent performance rather than public relations. There's more, Admiral Harrison continued. I've been asked to identify candidates for an advanced tactical development program that will be starting next month. This program selects only the most promising pilots for intensive training in next-generation warfare techniques and technologies. The implications of what the Admiral was describing began to dawn on Sarah. Advanced tactical programs were career-defining opportunities that opened doors to test pilot schools, weapons development projects, and eventually command positions. Being selected for such programs was recognition of exceptional ability and potential for future leadership. The program requires candidates who can think independently, adapt to changing situations, and demonstrate leadership under pressure, Morrison explained. Based on your recent performance, particularly your tactical decision-making during complex exercises, you have been recommended for selection. Admiral Harrison's expression softened as he continued. Lieutenant, I made an error in judgment several months ago. I allowed preconceptions and outdated thinking to cloud my assessment of your capabilities. Your subsequent performance has proven that those preconceptions were not only wrong, but unfair to an exceptional naval aviator. The Admiral stood and extended his hand toward Sarah. I would consider it an honor to recommend you for this advanced program, if you're willing to accept the opportunity. Sarah stood and accepted the Admiral's handshake, feeling the weight of this moment and its significance for her career. Sir, I would be honored to participate in the program and represent our squadron in advanced tactical development. The meeting continued for another 20 minutes as Morrison and Admiral Harrison provided details about the program, its duration, location, and the kinds of advanced training it would involve. The program would take her to the Navy's premier tactical development facility, where she would work with experimental aircraft systems, advanced electronic warfare technologies, and next-generation weapon systems. When the meeting concluded, Sarah walked back across the installation with a profound sense of achievement and anticipation. The same Admiral who had once dismissed her capabilities was now recommending her for one of the most prestigious advanced training programs in naval aviation. Her call sign Phoenix had indeed reverberated through the installation, creating opportunities that validated years of dedicated training and professional excellence. The following weeks passed quickly as Sarah prepared for the advanced program while continuing her regular squadron duties. Word of her selection had spread throughout the squadron, earning congratulations from fellow pilots and crew members who had witnessed her steady rise in reputation and capability. Commander Richards called her into his office one afternoon to discuss the transition to the advanced program. Phoenix, this opportunity represents the kind of career milestone that very few pilots achieve. You've earned this through consistent performance and the ability to excel under challenging conditions. Sir, I appreciate the confidence that you and the squadron have shown in my abilities, Sarah replied, genuinely grateful for the support she had received from her immediate leadership. There's something else, Richards continued. Admiral Harrison specifically requested to speak with our squadron about the importance of recognizing potential in all our pilots, regardless of initial impressions or preconceptions. He used your development as an example of how exceptional capability can sometimes be overlooked if we're not careful about our evaluation criteria. The irony of Admiral Harrison using her as an example of overlooked potential was not lost on Sarah. The same officer who had publicly questioned her abilities was now highlighting her story as a lesson for other senior leaders about the importance of fair and thorough evaluation of all personnel. As her departure date for the advanced program approached, Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point. From the initial dismissal by Admiral Harrison, through months of proving herself in increasingly challenging situations, she had demonstrated that professional excellence could overcome initial skepticism and build lasting reputation. The morning of her departure, she conducted a final pre-flight inspection of her squadron aircraft, knowing it would be months before she returned to regular operations with her current unit. The crew chief who had maintained her aircraft throughout her time with the squadron presented her with a small plaque commemorating her selection for advanced training. "Lieutenant, it's been an honor working with you," Petty Officer Rodriguez said, his pride evident in both his voice and expression. "Take care of yourself in that fancy training program. And don't forget about the crew that keeps you flying." Sarah's final flight with the squadron was a routine training sortie, but it carried special significance as she prepared to transition to the next phase of her career. As she landed and taxied back to the flight line, she could see members of the squadron gathered to bid her farewell and wish her success in the advanced program. Later that evening, at the informal farewell gathering organized by her squadron mates, Lieutenant Commander Thompson raised a toast to her achievements and future success. "To Phoenix," he said, raising his glass, "whose call sign has become synonymous with excellence and whose reputation has reverberated far beyond this installation." The gathering continued late into the evening as pilots and crew members shared stories, offered advice for the advanced program, and expressed their confidence in her future success. Sarah felt deeply grateful for the support and friendship of her squadron family, knowing that these relationships had been crucial to her professional development. As the evening concluded and she prepared to leave for her final night before reporting to the advanced program, Admiral Harrison appeared unexpectedly at the gathering. The room fell silent as the senior officer entered, but his presence was clearly welcome rather than intimidating. "Lieutenant Martinez," he said, approaching Sarah with a smile, "I wanted to personally wish you success in the advanced program and to thank you for an important lesson about the dangers of premature judgment." The Admiral's presence at the informal squadron gathering was unprecedented, demonstrating the genuine respect he had developed for Sarah's abilities and character. "Your performance over these past months has been exemplary, and I have complete confidence that you will excel in advanced training just as you have excelled here." The following morning, Sarah departed Naval Air Station Oceana for the Advanced Tactical Development Program, carrying with her the respect of her squadron, the recommendation of senior leadership, and the knowledge that her call sign Phoenix had indeed reverberated through the installation in ways that validated her dedication to excellence in naval aviation.